So today, I'm here to share with you, introduce to you a gentleman who's a dear friend of mine. He's helped me immensely, and it's the idea of how do I get my information out and engage my customers, and primarily how to use video to do that through the web. Helped me set up my studio and really helped me get going. He's been a dear friend, but more importantly, he's been a consultant to some of the biggest companies in the world. Here's a guy that started literally from nothing, but back in the early days of the web, back in 1991, most people forget, 1989 is when the World Wide Web really was created. So within a few years, he was already the guy that was, writing some of the first CD-ROMs games, that were out there. Did some of the first Mac games that existed for Macintosh. Went out and became the person that really, when the movie industry, was the guy that set up all those initial websites for Sony and for Columbia TriStar and for Fox. Was a guy that's, managed or helped some of the largest business in the world, 3M, Domino's Pizza. I mean, the list goes on and on. But he's also shown people how to get started from nothing. And I know that's what he's probably most proud of. So I want to introduce to you Mike Koenigs, my dear friend. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tony.
And thanks for welcoming us here. This is Digital Cafe. This is the place you started.
Well, I've got some great news for you. How would you like the chance to spend time with or interview Tony Robbins? Well, in a moment, you're going to get a chance to be a fly on the wall as I ask Tony two big questions in an interview that I did with him. Now, Tony has a brand new book. It's called Money, Master the Game, 7 Simple Steps to Financial Freedom. Now, one of the questions that I'm going to ask Tony is about investment advice for the entrepreneur or small business owner and how to become financially free. Now, Tony interviewed 50 self-made billionaires, including Warren Buffett, Tudor Jones, Boone Pickens, Charles Schwab, and more, and has managed to distill their wisdom into actionable steps that anyone can take. Now, the second question that I ask him about is the power of a book. Specifically, why did he choose to write a book after 20 years, especially given the fact that we live in a completely connected world where 73% of the human race engages with social media every single month? So why? What's the power of a book, and how could you use it too to grow your business? And as you can probably expect, Tony goes deep and provides some fantastic insights that only Tony can share. Now, if you know my personal story, you know how much Tony Robbins has helped me and my career. Because 20 years ago, I was an overweight, recently divorced, struggling entrepreneur. I was about $250,000 in debt, and I was buying groceries on a Super America gas card in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, a friend of mine, his name is Ben, he went through a massive life transformation in only 6 months. Prior to that, he was an underemployed, hard-drinking, overweight guy who wound up writing a best-selling book, started his own business, and became one of the world's leading Photoshop experts and speakers. And when I asked Ben what his secret was, he said 2 words: Tony Robbins. It was then that I vowed the next time I saw Tony on an infomercial, I'd invest in his personal power program. It's this one right here, just like this one. And if you recall, I already mentioned I was flat broke, but in my mailbox as I walked in the door after I had dinner with Ben that night was a brand new credit card with an $8,500 limit on it. So that night I turned on my TV and guess who was on? I'm not kidding you, it was Tony Robbins, great big smile, and I called the hotline. I ordered my copy of Personal Power. I had the package rushed to my home, and 48 hours later, I popped CD1 in my CD player. I listened to 15 minutes, and I was completely hooked. It was as though Tony was speaking directly to me. So once again, I picked up the phone, and I called up Tony's company, and a guy named Chris Hendrickson answered. And he enrolled me in Life Mastery, Wealth Mastery, Date with Destiny, and later I went through all of Tony's leadership programs too. Now the truth is, I used all my credit card available to me at the time. I was still struggling, but the bottom line is in weeks I was at an event. Within 60 days, I made massive changes in my life. And I wound up going through all of Tony's programs and went from a broken guy to getting in great physical shape, finding true love, and selling my first company, Digital Cafe, about a year later to a publicly traded company, and that was in 1999. So if you fast forward a couple of years, I was married, I had moved to San Diego, and I became very good friends with Chris and Pam Hendrickson. And for years, Pam was Tony's #1 product creation specialist for 18 years, and Chris worked with Tony for over 20. Now today, Chris and Pam and I have produced products and a book together. Our friends, our family, our children are all friends, and our lives are intertwined, and that's because of Tony. And I remember at a point when I was sitting in the audience, I vowed that I'd find a way to repay Tony for his extraordinary gift to me, not only transforming my life, but probably saving it too. So several years ago, through my relationship with Pam, I was able to help Tony with his online marketing, set up his home video studio, and spend a couple of days with him. And from that meeting, I introduced Tony to some of the most successful online marketers in the world. That's what this picture is here, including Frank Kern, Jeff Walker, Brendan Burchard, Mike Filsaime, John Reese, and a bunch more. And together, we helped Tony with an online product launch, and he rewarded all of us by producing a product called the New Money Masters. That's this package you see up here. The video you just saw was an introduction that Tony did when he introduced me in the program. Now, one evening at Tony's home in Palm Desert, he said, "Mike, proximity is power. If you take the 5 top people that you spend time with, add their incomes, and then divide by 5, that's probably what you make too. So if you surround yourself with extraordinary people who are successful and wealthy, that's what will probably happen to you too." Now, I've taken that to heart, and I've made a point of surrounding myself with incredible people, and I've continued on my path of personal growth and upward movement. In fact, I recently sold my company, and again, I directly acknowledge the fact that without Tony's guidance and training, I wouldn't be where I am today, either personally or professionally. Now, Tony and his team reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to support him in getting his book out to as many people as possible. So for a limited time and through a few friends, Tony is actually giving his brand new book away for the cost of shipping and handling. Now, all the details are at TonyRobbinsChange.com, and that will take you to a site to get the book for free. And I'm not getting compensated for sharing this with you. I'm just excited about the book and what it'll do for you. So no matter what you choose, I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did speaking with Tony. So here goes. So Tony, you've interviewed some of the top thought leaders in the investment world for this book. So what is there in your investment advice for the small business owner or entrepreneur? And I'm going to frame this up a little bit. So let's assume they're between 35 and 60 years old, making $150,000 to $1 million per year, and can invest 10 to 20% of their income, so that'd be between $15,000 and $200,000 per year, and want to reinvest their earnings. So if you overlaid the strategies of the thought leaders that you interviewed in your book, what would you or they invest in? And what is the best combination of safety and maximum ROI without having to watch the investments as a regular basis and actually make it a job?
Well, let's answer this a couple layers, because you're asking a big universal question, and it's like,
I know it.
I think you and the rest of the team on the phone here have all taught me you don't market to a forest, you market to individual trees, right? So now you're bringing it back up to the forest. And I know why you're doing it, just trying to simplify it. But let's be really clear. The right answer to your question is different for every person. I'm not being coy in any way, shape, or form. That's why I wrote this book, so that you can find the answer. Because I didn't want to make these generalizations that will turn out to be a disaster for one person and great for another. I will give you some universals that will help me answer that question. But let's start with a couple things. Number one thing above all else is every business owner needs to start a new business with no employees, with no overhead, and I call it their money machine. You must take a percentage of what you have. I don't care if your business is not making money. I want you to imagine it's a tax. If the government, raised their taxes by 10%, we'd all scream bloody murder, but we still pay it because we have to. But in this case, the tax is your freedom tax to yourself. And that money, whatever percentage that's going to be, 10, 15, 20%, that money's got to get set aside in a separate account where you never see it. It's never available to the business, because the business will always eat whatever's available. One of the most valuable pieces of advice I got early in my career, my early 20s, I got when I was visiting with Ken Blanchard. Ken Blanchard wrote those 1 Minute Manager books, and he's a dear friend of mine now for more than 30 years. And back then, I helped him take 4 strokes off his golf game and then play golf, but I knew the psychology side. He thought that was the greatest thing on earth. So he wanted to get back to me, and he said to me, Tony, I'm going to give you the best financial advice I've ever given. Your business will always eat whatever is available. And that's the nature of a growing business. It's the nature of an entrepreneur. He said, I will tell you right now, this book you're about to write, and any products that you do not make them part of your company. Mark that separately out. Don't let it go in those funds. That's got to be your personal money. Your companies will get the benefit of the customers, the clients, the opportunities, the branding, but you got to separate that out. And so he artificially helped me to take something off the table. And I can remember times when, the economy was up and down, and businesses were having challenging times, but I was in great shape because I set this aside and I figured out what to do with it, obviously, to make it happen. So you want a money machine. You want something that's going to make money while you sleep. You want to have something that, no matter what happens, to your business. It'll make you sleep better. It'll make you better in your business. That's number one. And by the way, the first step that I talk about in these 7 steps is tap the power. And what I'm talking about is tap the power of being an owner outside your own business, your own life. Tap the power of that compounding. That's really what I'm talking about here in automating it. Second piece, you got to make sure that you remember that whatever money is all about, what it gives you emotionally. Like everybody thinks the goal, when I was growing up as a kid, it was like, okay, I'm going to become wealthy and I'm going to retire and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm going to do anything to get as long as I live. Well, I did that by what I thought retirement would be for me at the age of 19 rather, right? Where about $100,000 a year, that was it. I don't have to work for it. $100,000 a year. Holy cow, that's retirement. 3 months into it, I'm going to kill myself. Like all my friends are working. I mean, in that case, how many bars can you go to? How many girls can you chase? It's like I had to look for something else in my life that was more meaningful. I've had friends that have sold their businesses. One friend sold his business, made $700 million cash. That was his personal net take out of the gross sale. And same thing. I mean, within 4 months, he was looking to try and buy his business back. I mean, eventually he ended up buying his company back a couple of years later because he wanted to get back in the game. Everybody I know, my friends, guys like Steve Wynn, right? Steve's 72 years old. Steve works harder today than he's ever worked in his life, but he does it because he loves it. So the goal we got to remember is not to get financially free so you don't work, because if you quit at 40, you're going to go nuts. You quit at 50, you're going to go nuts. What you want to do is not have to work. So then what you're doing because you just love it. That's a completely different game, and then you walk different, you talk different. So you've got to be able to set yourself up to do that. That's what this first component is about. Third element is you got to remember this is all an emotional game. So asset allocation is the single most important decision you're going to make in your life. First, you got to decide to get in the game. Second, you got to know the rules of the game so you don't get screwed. That's the second part of this book. Third, you got to set up the game so it's winnable, have the goals that are really real. But fourth, the most important investment decision is not do you buy Apple or not whether you invest in that office building, not where you just put one chunk of money. It's how you break up those investments. Because this is what I learned from Ray Dalio. He said, listen, I'm going to tell you point blank. Everybody gravitates to a particular type of investment category that they grew up with or like, or they think is the hottest thing or successful. So some people love real estate because they think they understand that. Some people are into stocks or bonds because they understand it. Some people want to do commodities, whatever. He said, here's what I can tell you in 40 plus years in the business. I got 1,500 of the smartest people. I have to look at businesses all over the earth, every market you can imagine simultaneously. Whatever you love the most, whatever you're most heavily invested in, will drop 50 to 70% at some point in your life. 50 to 70, I can show you statistically guaranteed. Because the problem is you're going to be too heavily weighted because it's what you think gives you more money, gives you a better return, it's what you know, and you're going to be screwed. So every single one of these 50 people I interviewed, and it ended up being 55, by the way, every single one of them, Nobel Prize winners to self-made billionaires, all said asset allocation is everything. Now, how do I divide my assets up? Well, I'll give you the simplest version of it right now for 2 seconds. Imagine it's the ultimate bucket list. There's a bucket you put some of your money in, and you put that money in that bucket because it's secure, meaning you're not going to lose it. It's got the least chance of losing it, and as a result, if there's very little risk, there's not as much upside. The second bucket is the one everybody wants to put their money in. It's the growth bucket. It's where I have the greatest upside, but it's also the risk bucket, and we forget that until we lose 50%. Then you got to make 100% to get even, to get back. So what you got to decide is how much of my life, based on how much time I have to accumulate, based on what really my risk tolerance is, not what I say my risk tolerance is, which is almost always different. What is it that really affects me? My cash flow? Based on these criteria, how much do I want to keep secure, growing more slowly, and how much do I want to go more aggressively? And I give you a little test in the book that are actually really entertaining and fun, and it's interesting to see what people's real risk tolerance is. In some of my seminars, we'll do like a money tap game, and I'll have people go out and I'll say, okay, everybody stand up and make change. They what? I said, make change. Open your pockets, make change. That's all I tell them. So people pull out money and somebody changes a $5 bill for 5 ones, and a 10 for 2, for 2 5s or 20. But invariably, some people pull out a $100 bill, and somebody comes by and they take the $100 bill and they give them $1. And the person sits there looking like shocked. And I do this for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and they say, okay, sit down, and I just continue the seminar like nothing's happened. And I guarantee it, every group, when you got thousands of people, there's a couple people really pissed off. And somebody raises their hand and go, wait a second, I want my $100 back. I go, what are you talking about? They go, I gave $100, this guy took $1. I want my money back. The game's over. I said, first of all, who told you that the game was over? Second of all, who told it was your money? And third of all, why would I do that? If you're that uncomfortable with a $100 loss and you think you're going to become a business owner and investor, You're in deep shit. So most people have no clue. So asset allocation is the secret. But now let me lead you to a couple things that I learned that I think will be helpful, I think, in the direction of what you're looking for. If you have limited time and you want to take your money, you want to grow it and compound it, what you don't want to do is lose. What all 50 of these people, and I highlight 12 of them in the book, like I take my 4-hour interviews and I do like 12 pages of each person. And of the top 12 out of the universe, I say they're all different. They all have different approaches, but what's universal? Every single one of them is obsessed with not losing money. Warren Buffett's whole theory is, what's 2 rules to investing? What are they? Don't lose money is rule number 1. Rule number 2 is see rule number 1. Right? They all are obsessed. Paul Tudor has made money 21 straight years, never lost a dime because he's obsessed about not losing. Because when you lose, it not only has a psychological and emotional effect, but it has a time effect on your compounding. But here's what they do best. They look at ways that they know they're going to be wrong, but they can be protected when they're wrong. See, most entrepreneurs, we're really certain what got you successful. You didn't listen to other people, and you pushed your way through it. But investing, if you listen to other people, you could be in trouble. If you don't listen, you could be in trouble. No matter who you listen to, they're going to be wrong. So the best investors have a system, an asset allocation that says, when I'm wrong, I'm going to still do well. The best one on earth for making sure that you don't lose on anybody on earth is Ray Dalio. So in Ray Dalio's case, I asked all these people, I said, look, if I was talking to a business owner, if I was talking to a mom, if I was talking to a millennial, and I was having this conversation with them, and I was going to really help them out, and you just got done telling me that they're not going to make money with any wealth manager long term, that the fees are going to eat them up, you just got done telling me, all the people won't work with, how can it help me help these guys? How can we do this? You made 21% a year for 23 straight years. And he said, Tony, I already answered that question because I said, what would you tell your kids? If you couldn't give them any money, you can only give them a set of principles, a set of rules, or a portfolio. That's all you can give them, and you want to ensure they were wealthy long term. What would you tell them? I said, I answered that a few years ago because I looked around and said, I got 1,500 people that work their tails off. I'm in the most competitive business in the world. I needed something that if I was gone, my family would be taken care of forever, and also all the philanthropic things I did want to do would continue. And he said, I realized everybody says you have asset allocation, like you balance your portfolio with like 50% stocks, 50% bonds, but then 2008 happens and they both go down. So this whole theory of asset allocation is wrong. So he said, I became obsessed for 5 years, and I uncovered something really interesting. I uncovered that when you try to balance your portfolio, it's not balanced at all. Stocks are 3 times more volatile than bonds. So in shorthand, so you understand what I'm saying, if you're 50-50 stocks and bonds, you're in your 50s and someone says we're going to do 60-40, 50-50, we're going to balance you out, from a risk perspective, you have 90% at risk and only 10% that's protected. So he said, I came up with a way of changing this. Every economic environment, increased interest rates, lowered interest rates, economy rising, economy shrinking. There are 4 seasons, and I looked at every environment and saw in every environment some type of investment does well and others do poorly. I figured the matrix of it, and I put it together and created what I call my all-weather portfolio. And when I tested it all the way back to 1925, I've done unbelievably well. Like, Tony, you just don't lose money. You just don't. Doesn't matter what the environment is. It's pennies, and you're always making money. Now, could you make more by taking more risk? Yes, but who wants to do that? You're talking about somebody who wants to run their business. So I said, okay, explain the portfolio to me. He explained it. When it was all done, I said, I'm good at really simplifying things. I can teach this to anybody. I will write this in a way people get it. But I said, you just gave me a recipe. But the most important part of the recipe is the amounts and qualities. If you said, build a chocolate cake, use some chocolate, use some dairy products, use some flour. I need to know it's grade A flour. I need to know, is it dairy? Is it whole milk? Is it buttermilk? I need, is it a teaspoon? Is it a gallon? I need the amounts and qualities. I need your secret sauce. And he looked at me and he laughed and he goes, Tony, I can't give you that. That's my business. He gave me the whole $5 billion, $100 million thing. And I said, you know what? I know, but you haven't taken a new client for 10 years. You're not going to take new clients. You're giving them half of all you earn. Give me the secret sauce. And I teased him and pushed him, and then he did. And when I went, I was shaking at the time, like literally vibrating. Because he said, well, it's complex. I said, well, give me one without leverage. Well, it won't be perfect. And he said, well, you're non-perfect. Will be better than anybody else's. And so he created a portfolio. We call it the All Seasons Portfolio. And here's what I can tell you. It makes money in every market that we've been able to test for 75 years. And so if you were looking for a asset allocation, that's one. But in the book, I also bring you all these other people. So, if you go see David Swensen is the most successful institutional investor of all time from Yale. Took $1 billion, made $24 billion out of it in 2 decades. He'll get you a higher rate of return, but you'll have to take more risk. So that's why the answer to your question, Mike, is If I want to take more risk with that money, then maybe you want to go in a Swenson direction, and you can model his portfolio exactly. If you want to have a great return but never be able to sleep every night no matter what, then perhaps you want to be taking a little bit more direct look at what Ray is doing. So it really depends on your goals, your risk tolerance, the amount of time you have to collect. If you're really young, you can take more risks. If you're older and you got less time, you're going to take less risks. So those types of portfolios. And I'll plant one more seed with you. All these people don't lose money. They do everything differently, but they don't lose money. All these people have a system, so when they're wrong, they can still make money. Asset allocation. All of these people are tax efficient. So if someone else may want to ask me about that later on, so I don't keep rambling on all these pieces. But I want to tell you one more. It was mentioned earlier, just the term. They all are obsessed with asymmetrical risk reward. Asymmetrical risk reward simply means, big words, it means most great investors, you think, take giant risks to make giant rewards, and nothing can be furthest from the truth. They take the smallest risk possible for huge rewards. I'll give you a business example. Many sitting at the table here, Sir Richard Branson, I do too. And Richard, when he started, Virgin Airlines, that's a big risk. I mean, you got to buy these big airplanes. It's a huge expense. The airline business is not a very profitable business for most people. So everybody thinks about Richard as a giant risk taker. When it comes to his life, he's a big risk taker. Getting out of the balloon and going across the country. But when it comes to business, he's not. His number one question is, how do we protect the downside? What's the worst downside in any business? It's his number one question. And guess what he did here? He made Boeing make him a deal that if he bought these planes and it didn't work out, he could send the planes back and have no debt. That's the kind of thing that Richard Branson does. So people don't understand. And here's what I mean by that. Paul Tudor Jones, 21 straight years making money. I'm coaching him for 21 years. His firm has had 28 years of success consistently. Unbelievable for one of his particular funds. Well, how does he do that? Well, here's how he does it. When he risks little for a lot. He and I, when I first met him, he was having some challenging times, and I went to study what was he doing when he was at his best, and I uncovered a principle that he was no longer using, and he's used it ever since for the 21 years I've worked with him. It's called 5 to 1. 5 to 1 is this. If I'm going to go risk $1, I got to be certain I can make 5. That's his philosophy and approach. On the places where he's taking risk. Now, a security bucket, that's different. But if I'm going to take risk, for $1 of significant risk, I want to make 5. I got to be certain to make 5, but he knows he's going to be wrong. So if I'm wrong once, I can now take another $1. Now I spend 2 to make 5. He can be wrong 3 times out of 4 and still break even. He can be wrong 3 times and make 20%. I mean, it's just, I'll give you another example. I interviewed Kyle Bass. Kyle Bass, if you've read some of those extraordinary books that talk about Wall Street, went down the name of the great writer, the guy who wrote Flyboys, Michael Wolff, what's his name?
It's Wolff, right? Michael Wolff?
No, not Michael Wolff. Anyway, I'll think of it anyway. But if you haven't heard Kyle Bass...
Michael Lewis, that's who it is, sorry.
Yeah, Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis's books. He starts one of them boomerang out. He tells the story of Kyle Bass. Kyle Bass, in the worst economy we've seen in 80 years, in the middle of the subprime crisis, takes $30 million and turns it into $2 billion in 2 years. Now, when you hear numbers this big, people, they don't realize what these numbers mean. So just for a second. 1 million seconds ago, I want you all to get this again. 1 million seconds ago what was 1 million seconds ago? That was 12 days ago. 1 million. The president talks about millionaires and billionaires in the same breath. I just want to shake him because they're in different universes. Because 1 million seconds ago, 12 days ago. So when would be 1 billion seconds ago? The answer is 32 years ago. Like 32 years. 1 trillion, by the way, is 32,000 years ago before man was known as man. But then see, 1 million and 1 billion is universes. You're in a completely different universe. To go from 30 million to 2 billion in 2 years is unbelievable. I sat down with Kyle. Turns out he's been a fan of my work all since literally listening to my stuff in college, helped shape his career. So he opened up the full doors. He showed me everything. Here's how he did it. He risked 6 cents for every $1. In other words, if I'm going to risk 6 cents, my upside has to be $1. If I'm wrong, I lost 6 cents. If I'm right, I get $1. I get 100 cents. Well, think about that. He could be wrong 15 times and still make money. And he wasn't wrong 15 times, which is why he made 30 million to 2 billion. So asymmetrical risk reward is amazing. You can't do it with everything, but you look for it. In my book, I show example after example of ways that people can tap into that. So the answer to your question, I'm giving you in 3 forms. First, the most important thing for that business owner is to have a second business, a money machine that makes money while they're asleep, that has no employees, has no hassles, It's a percentage of that money you take off the top. It's a tax. You set it aside, and I'll show you where to invest it. But first, you got to automate it so you never see it, and it starts to build. That's number one. Second, you got to make sure that whatever you're going to invest in gives you the emotional reward you want. For some people, they're better off to have a small return and be totally secure and let it grow through time and make them free. For other people, they can take bigger risks, and they enjoy taking the risks, and they're still going to be okay. That has to do with stage of life. That has to do with how much cash flow you have, et cetera. But thirdly, you really want to get yourself an asset allocation that protects you if you're wrong, and you want to get an asset allocation that's proven over the years. Now, there's past performance is no guarantee of future performance. We say that all the time. But 75 years of performance is not the same as a fund that did well for the last 2 years. And so I would argue to you that that's something well worth considering on the type of people that I've got for you inside of this book. And then if you want to grow, if you really want to grow, look for asymmetrical risk reward. I will say one last thing about your owners, because I'm very passionate about the subject. I mean, Business Mastery is my favorite program now. I do it for 5 days, a couple times a year. I've learned another distinction that anyone listening owns a business should check out. Most people have heard, most business owners, 86% of business owners will never sell their business. The business will die, meaning with them. And you got a lot of baby boomers that are part of that grouping that's happening now. They want their kid to do it. Their kid doesn't want to do it. They don't sell it to somebody else. It's hard to sell. They don't take it public. 86% don't. And a business is a giant asset that you should be getting a multiple on. But the problem is, if you own your business, you don't want to sell it because it's part of your life. So I've heard about ESOPs for years, which is an employee stock ownership plan. And ESOPs are something I thought you had to have a multi-billion-dollar business to do. What I found out in the last few years is that you can take your company, you can own it, run it, direct it, control it, shape it, and still sell a piece of it to, even if you don't have anybody in your market to buy it to, you can sell it to your employees, and you can do it legally and appropriately to a person who's a separate fiduciary. They look out for the employees, they make the bids and so forth. But you can end up getting 6, 7, 8 times your earnings. If you have a business that only has 12 employees and $1 million of actual profits, you can do an ESOP. I took one of my companies recently that I never thought I'd sell in a million years, still run it, still direct it, and I'm experienced 9 figures in 1 year from that, and I still have 40% of the company. I mean, I would have never sold that business. I would have never seen 9 figures out of that business. And what's so cool is all my employees now in that business also are getting a chunk of money they'll never dreamed of, and it's all tax protected for them as well. So if people are interested, you can reach out to me, and I can explain more about ESOPs. But just want people to know that business opportunity is out there. And if you're going to get wealthy, your business is a great opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Tony. I think you just sold some books there. So the next question is about writing and the value of books, because in the first question, when I asked you about investment advice for small business owners and entrepreneurs, you talked about setting up your business to be a money machine to actually produce value. So this is linked to that, and it's potentially a way to make that happen. So in the past, you and I have actually spoken, and you've actually talked about writing books, and you told me in the past that you didn't enjoy the process of actually writing books. Now this one is nearly 700 pages long with all the reference material. It's very dense, and it really feels like you enjoyed writing it based on the tone of your voice when I go through it. And it's obvious that your excitement for the content and the people that you interviewed really comes out. But my question for you is, in this age of online video and podcasts and social media, billions of screens, why did you write a book? And what do you believe the power of a book is? And why do you feel writing a book is necessary and helpful for you in sharing this message? And also, what are the long-term branding and marketing benefits to you or to a small business owner or entrepreneur for engagement, value, growth, and leads?
Well, that's a great question because I've avoided it like the plague. I don't enjoy sitting still doing this. I told you how much I enjoy the live reality aspect. When it's reality, i.e. somebody in front of you, I can do something that doesn't work, I can change it. I'm going to get to the outcome. I'm going to serve that person. When you don't know who's in front of you, it's a little harder. So one of the ways I enjoyed writing this book was that I actually decided that I knew what was missing was an audience. So I got one. I wrote things, and then I got people to sit in front of me and read it. And I got people in various economic levels and socioeconomic levels. And I said, read this book to me. And I watched them like a hawk while they read the book. That's literally what I did. And I went, they don't get it. Oh, that's overwhelming. Oh, they know what that term means. And I did that for, I think people who are reading the book are going, my God, this, it's like my seminar is 50 hours in a weekend, Unleash the Power Within, most of you know. And nobody sits for a 3-hour movie that somebody spent $300 million on And I get Oprah who tells me I won't sit for, 2 hours, Tony, I love you dearly, but that's the most I'll sit anywhere. 12 hours later, she's standing in her chair going, this is one of the greatest experiences of my life in front of the camera, right? So I know how to make time disappear. I just needed, I normally have my voice and music and lots of other things to use. I felt hamstrung. So I took the hamstrung out by saying, read to me. And then I just said, okay, what do they need? What do they need? Like that teacher. Oh, I'm going to show her a teacher that makes $4 million a year, show her exactly how to do it. So that allowed me to enjoy writing the book, make the book more passionate. Why write a book? I mean, one TED Talk, I've got one of the top 10 TED Talks in the history of TED. I've gotten, 35, 40 million people, between YouTube and TED and everybody else that's watched it. And it's like it took me 18 minutes to do. So it's like, there's a beta ratio of reward there in getting your message out. But this subject deserves mastery. You're not going to master it writing a freaking blog. We live in a culture where everybody wants, give me the cliff note, give me the one thing. And you know what? If you do that, you're gonna have poverty. You're gonna have pain because you might do well for a while. You're gonna be those people make a lot of money, but you're gonna bite it like everybody does who doesn't master this topic. And I said, I can make it simple. I can make it super entertaining. I can make it really interesting, but it really requires somebody going a step at a time. So I'll eventually put this into probably an audio video type of format as well. And in fact, I've created like a little gift for people who get the pre-launch of this, of 3 little kind of fast-track videos to create, because most people don't read. But I wanted something that you could get that was dirt cheap, that would be distributed all over the earth, and that, for whatever, I think they're charging $28 for it. So I'm sure by the time it gets discounted, it'll be $20. For $20, you could get what Ray Dalio, you got to have $5 billion to know before. For $20, you could have a plan that could take you from wherever you are to where you really want to be. Which, frankly, I just wanted to deliver something that there was no barrier to entry, and I wanted to deliver something in a format where you could digest it at your own pace. And so my deal with people is I said, look, you could do a chapter a day. A chapter, a day on this, and in 6 weeks you got a new life. And it's, we say it's 700 pages, that's indexed and everything. It's about 610 pages. But it doesn't feel that way for people when they read it, and especially if they chunk it. Now, I'm the kind of guy, some of you listening would say, screw that shit, I'm not going to do this over 6 weeks. I'm going to take a long weekend and absorb this big baby, and I'm going to start to change my life. So it just depends on a person's personality. But I did it for that reason. As far as my brand, a lot of people thought that I'm if you haven't been to an event and you don't know the depth of what I do, they thought I was a motivator. And then over the decades, I started training therapists who thought I was evil because I had infomercials and made money. And now I've got every major school of psychology that endorses my work because, who else has had 37 years and never lost a single, out of thousands, not a single suicide? And we've got videos of the people and seeing them 3 years later. So I've got a whole discipline now that's been taught in that area. On the business side, big businesses, because of people like Mark Benioff, who wrote the introduction to my book. Mark's, his company, Salesforce.com, he started right out of my Unleash the Power Within seminar. He left Oracle, said, I'm going to build a company that's going to change the world because of you, Tony. He said, I'm going to apply everything you teach, and I'm going to do $100 million. Well, now he does $5 billion a year. Forbes has selected him 4 years in a row as the most innovative company in the world, beating Apple for 4 straight years. Right? They're the Apple of their industry, extraordinary business, and he tells everybody, in the book he says, Salesforce.com wouldn't exist without Tony Robbins. Everything in there comes from my strategies, and people think I'm a motivator, and it's the strategies some of you know, my RPM elements. He calls it V2 Mom. He just blatantly, in fact, I can say this now because this won't go out till after tomorrow, but I'm on the cover of Forbes. I actually got the cover of Forbes. It comes out tomorrow, and it's because of all the people that I influence in the financial world from a different level. It's like I'm helping to level the playing field. I'm democratizing these financial services. I bought companies like Hightower, which is the 5th largest registered investment advisory in the world. They have $30 billion in assets. And I made them my partner in this process and bringing this information to the average person, taking what they only have ultra-wealthy clients, bringing the ultra-wealthy information to the average person. And I gave away all my interest in it to charity, to give you an idea. I could have made a fortune. I got a third of that business. So I'm democratizing that. I'm transforming businesses. And so Forbes decided that who on earth influences presidents of countries, presidents of some of the largest corporations in the world, and has got the ear of, the top financial people on earth. And so, it's quite amazing to me, quite humbling, but I got the cover of Forbes, And, also I built my businesses. Most people have no clue. I've applied all that I've learned in business also. So now my businesses this year will do over $5 billion in revenues. I remember when I was struggling not long ago with, 100 million, 200 million, but all companies that I started or companies that I started become a partner in. So as a result of that, I've got some reach now. So that's part of why I can do a book like this in give away all the money of it and a lot more above it. It's part of why I can do the things I can do today. I wanted to just contribute something that I thought for decades would make a difference. And I wrote this book with the mindset of, I want to empower that business owner. I want to empower that mom that's struggling. I want to empower that millennial just got out of school. I want to empower that person who's very sophisticated. I want to empower that person who's a baby boomer saying, what the hell to do? And I want to write this book so that the people I've interviewed make money in every market, in those down times you're worried about and in the good times. This is priceless knowledge that for decades can come about. I wrote a book when I was 24 called Unlimited Power. I'm stopped every day by people go, I just read your book. It's so incredible. And I just like, wow, I wrote that when I was 24. I'm 54. It was 30 years ago, and people are still being touched by it every day. This is a book that I'm hoping will touch people for at least another 2 decades or more, and that's why I did it. I think it's a way to reach a mass audience. I love when I'm in a car and somebody's driving me in a limo or something like that, and I hear about what's going on in their life. I'm always trying to help. I always, when there's something in their life outside of financial, I send them Ultimate Edge, I send them a book, but now I can send them something that if they will just follow these 7 steps, I have no worries about their financial future. So I wrote it as something I can give to people as well, which is what I end up doing anyway, giving it to everybody in terms of society in the long run.
Well, thanks, Tony. I really appreciate that. I know you're super busy and on your way to India right now. So I really, really appreciate what you've done, and I'm super excited about your book, too. I've poured through it like crazy. And for you watching this or listening to this right now, I hope you've enjoyed the interview and are inspired by what Tony just shared with you. So right now, you can benefit from the wisdom that Tony shares in this book. And again, all you have to do is just visit TonyRobbinsChange.com to get your copy. And Tony's actually going to give you the book. All you have to do is cover the cost of shipping and handling. And right now, I'm busy implementing as many of the strategies as I can that are in here over the next year. And no matter where you are, whether you're financially challenged or you've got tens, hundreds, or thousands or millions of dollars to invest, I believe this book will impact your life. So obviously, I'd recommend that you grab it right now and make sure you let me know what you think. And also remember, I'm not being compensated at all for this. I'm doing it because I absolutely love Tony. I love what he's given me, and I know he can help you too. So with that, thank you so much. Head on over to TonyRobbinsChange.com, grab your copy, and I will talk to you very soon.